Everybody, and welcome. I am Kim Gibson, an April board member. I'm actually the vice chair of the April board and the facilitator of the call today. Thank you for joining us for this workshop. Dive into DETACs CIL Employment Program Readiness Assessment. I want to mention a few housekeeping items before we get started today. First, when you scroll over the screen, a menu bar pops up. Depending on what device you are on, you can find that menu bar at the top or at the bottom of the screen. That is where you will find the closed captioning for today's session. You can view that captioning by selecting the CC tab on the menu bar. For sign language interpreting, you can find the interpreter on the screen. If you would like to change the size of the screen, if slides are shown, you can select the line in the middle to make the slides larger or smaller. If you have technical issues, please use the chat feature. You can find the word bubble in the same menu bar. If you would like to turn the chat feature off if you are using a screen reader, you can do that by pressing Alt+H. Or please use the info and help section on the conference website for more help. I want to remind people, do not use the chat for questions and answers. So for all Q&A times, please note the Q&A box is on the menu bar. That is where you will submit the questions. Please only submit questions there, as they may get lost in chat. To ask a question or make a comment, you can also select the hand option on the menu bar. That allows us to know you have a question. For those of you on the phone today or using keystrokes, we ask that you press *9 or Alt+Y on your keypad to raise your hand. We will then let you know when you can unmute. You can select the unmute option or Alt+A if using keystrokes. Remember, if you join into the conversation, please keep all background noise down as much as possible to allow us to hear you clearly. Okay, I will turn it over to your presenters. And again, I did say I'm Kim Gibson. There you guys go. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kim. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amy Gonzalez, and I am the project manager for the Disability Employment Technical Assistance Center, or the DETAC, as we call it for short. The cover slide that we have displayed on the screen has an image of a group of people dressed in business attire that are all kind of seem to be conversing over maybe a topic at work. It has Caucasian people, it has people of color, and it also has people with disabilities. That's just our front kind of introduction slide. It says the date and the title of our presentation, which is Dive into DETACs CIL Employment Program Readiness Assessment Tool. As I mentioned, I'm the program manager for the DETAC. I am a Latinx woman. I am inching my way to 40. I have dark brown, a little bit past my shoulder length hair, dark brown eyes. I am wearing lavender circular shaped glasses, and I have a black and a flowered dress on today. I am joining from my home office in Boston. My background is a piece of my table with a bookcase, my daughter's a betta fish, and then I have a photo of a lotus flower. Once our other two subject matter experts speak, they will visually describe themselves as well. So it's great to be here today, and we're really looking forward to engaging with the CILs on the call today, to having a rich discussion. And we'd like to thank April for having us. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of what the DETAC is. I'm going to talk about who our target population is, which are grantees. And then I'm going to share some other information, ways to get involved, examples of some resources that we have produced and these two SMEs actually have really produced. And then we'll turn it over to Sandy and Melanie, who are going to take a deeper dive into that assessment tool. And so the DETAC was established in October of 2020. We are a 5-year federally funded technical assistance center grant. Our funds come from the Administration on Disabilities, and we have goals to improve competitive integrated employment outcomes for individuals with disabilities that are touched by the grantee network in some way. We focus on improving partnerships within the grantee network and with other partners. And we also focus on enhancing economic self-sufficiency for those same individuals that are touched by the grantee network. Our target population or grantees are centers for independent living, state councils on developmental disabilities, university centers for excellence in developmental disabilities, or UCEDs, state protection and advocacy entities. We also work with traumatic brain injury programs, and we just welcomed a new round of grantees this past year, which are the community collaborations for employment under the projects of national significance. Every one of these grantees, as most of you know, serves people with disabilities directly or indirectly in an array of ways. And that is holds similar to the technical assistance that we provide. It's individualized and it's really based on a case-by-case needs. Next slide, please. And we are on slide 3 right now. Technical assistance themes. Okay, so we focus on 3 themes. These themes we try to apply to the webinars that we facilitate. We try to focus on ensuring that these themes are within the publications that we produce and the technical assistance that we provide to grantees. So we focus on systems change. We focus on building capacities of direct support staff through multiple learning modes, which would be expanding on skills, learning from peers and self-advocates and others in the field, and resource dissemination of best practices. We focus on innovation and creative forms of training and technical assistance, building the capacity of the network, developing and really scaling out evidence-based practices. And the third element of our theme is collaboration. We talked about our goal to enhance collaborations within the grantee network and outside of that with state folks and other partners. But we also focus on partnerships with each other at the local level, with our colleagues at the federal government. And again, these collaborations, which may be a new partnership that's being developed, enhancing collaboration with DR or Medicaid or education. The goal, again, is to enhance competitive integrated employment outcomes for people with disabilities. So again, 3 key themes that we have in this center: collaboration, innovation, and systems change. We believe that those are essential ingredients to running a successful technical assistance center. Next slide, please, and that would be slide 4. All right, so earlier I talked about the modes of technical assistance, and now I'm just going to take a deeper dive into giving some more concrete examples of what that looks like. We facilitate a national community of practice webinar. In the first 2 years of the contract, because we are just coming into our 3rd option year, we focused on facilitating national webinars on a monthly basis, where we bring in Centers for Independent Living, we bring in other grantees to highlight innovative and some just really cool activities and initiatives that folks were working on that we really wanted to elevate at the national level for knowledge transfer. One thing to say about our national webinars is that we try very, very hard to ensure that these webinars are diverse and they are reflecting individuals with disabilities and individuals who maybe are working in the field as a minority or identifying as a person of color. We also focused on quite an array of publications. So in the first year when we launched, we were slated to produce 20 technical assistance briefs. This past option year, we produced up to 9, and this coming year, we have up to 6. There are quite a bit of briefs that we have to share about, but the ones that I really want to focus on are some of the nifty ones that we produced that actually the SMEs here today have produced, which is that employment program readiness assessment tool that we're going to talk about. Yesterday, the SMEs gave an amazing, what I hear, presentation about partnership development and the importance of that and how to work together and ensure key ingredients and strategies are ingrained in partnership development and maintenance. We also have other briefs about family engagement, self-employment. We encourage you to take a look at, the rest of the publications that we have. I'm proud to say that this coming year, we'll also be working with April and some other subject matter experts to deliver more products and more technical assistance. We also have podcasts, which is a heavy hitter for us. We formerly had podcasts and blogs. Now, blogs were just kind of like a short summary of maybe a best practice or a self-advocate's experience in employment or tips and tricks. What we did for this coming year is we did away with the blogs and we have a more focused energy on developing podcasts. Some of the podcasts that we've developed thus far are one focused on building equity in policy and programming by the Washington Initiative for Supported Employment. We also have a really cool podcast by our partners at the National Association of State Head Injury Administrators, NASHA, who created a podcast with an individual with a brain injury who was employed and by their employer. So they all shared the necessary ingredients to ensure that this person can obtain employment but keep their job as well while receiving the proper support services. And then what we do is we focus on publishing a quarterly newsletter. And that newsletter really is a compilation of all of the products, the kind of the latest and the greatest activities that we have done over the last quarter. Those newsletters are issued at the end of the last quarter. And so we're getting ready, we're gearing up to issue the last quarterly newsletter of the contract year. And then another thing that I want to talk about is something called Results and Innovations in Systems Excellence, or RISE e-learning communities. These e-learning communities are intended for grantees to achieve at least one goal. They're very high impact. They focus on peer-to-peer engagement, and they focused on the grantees coming to the table with a goal that's focused on the subject at hand. For example, we are just now facilitating an e-learning community on employer engagement and partnership. The two SMEs are working with grantees to walk them through assessing their level of engagement with employers, identifying how these grantees want to partner with employers and how they can develop tools and use resources to engage with employers in a meaningful way. Now, this looks different for everyone, right? This looks really different for SILs, and this can look really different for like state councils on developmental disabilities. And so we actually have a group of SILs primarily that are participating in that cohort. We also had, just for example, another e-learning community that was focused on vamping up services and supports after kind of that COVID, right? We were all at home for a couple of years. We were all kind of isolated. Programs changed. We had to restructure and reorg. And that e-learning community basically took grantees and other participants through a journey of project management, how to identify goals, how to ensure that everyone in the team was working together to complete this common goal and to take some of these best practices to scale in supporting people with disabilities to obtain employment. And so that's just a small example of some of the e-learning communities that we've offered. The upcoming e-learning communities for this contract year, we are set to probably offer about 6 or 7. We're still planning, as opposed to about 8 or 10 sessions. What we're going to do is offer many e-learning communities. So there'll be about 4 to 6 sessions, each geared at about an hour each, all focused on employment, all focused on supporting people with disabilities and economic self-sufficiency or partnership development. And so stay tuned. April and the DETAC have some really exciting upcoming activities planned, and we're really looking forward to working with April in this process. So I'm just so excited to talk about that. Next slide, please. That would be slide 5. All right, Well, now I'm going to turn it over to our amazing subject matter experts who will introduce themselves. So take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Melanie Hogan. I am the Executive Director of Linking Employment Abilities and Potential. We are a CIL in Cleveland, Ohio. The headshot image on the slide is a picture of me with long brown hair and wearing a black, gray, blue checkered sweater and not wearing glasses. If you're seeing me on the screen, I am wearing glasses so I can see my presentation. And I am wearing sort of a paisley purple, pink, gray top with a blue background. So yeah, happy to be here, excited to be presenting this assessment tool with you all. And the next slide is introducing Sandy.
Good afternoon, everyone, or morning or evening, depending on where you're at right now. We are on slide 6, and my name is Sandy Jordan. I am Director of Employment Programs with Able, South Carolina, which is a CIL in South Carolina. If you didn't pick that up from my accent, I am from South Carolina, born and raised. Very proud of that fact. On the photo on this slide is my headshot, and I am a white woman with long brown hair. I wear glasses, and on the photo I'm wearing a teal blouse and I'm smiling. Today I am at home and I'm wearing the same glasses in the photo, and I have on a dark navy shirt with different colors on them, different little prints and colors. So I'm really excited to be here. Thank you. I am going to kick us off for the rest of the presentation. So I am moving on right now to slide 7, and we're going to talk about this tool that Amy discuss briefly, and just kind of give you an overview of the tool first, and then dive in a little bit deeper and hopefully have some conversation around the tool to help you really evaluate your CIL. So the purpose of the tool is really to evaluate and to develop your employment services at your CIL. Employment services are very essential to a CIL. We all know that employment for people with disabilities is very important, and people with disabilities don't have as many employment opportunities as other folks. And we play a very key role as the Center for Independent Living in helping people with disabilities access those same employment services as everyone else. And so really the purpose of the tool is to assess and to evaluate the CIL's current knowledge, skills, activities, and gauge organizational commitment and access organizational capacity. And it's all focused on employment services. So we're going to, with the tool, evaluate your CIL's readiness and capacity needs in order to build an effective employment program. And this tool, you know, it's really useful for folks that are kind of new in their employment journey, in providing employment services to people with disabilities, but it also can be useful to CILs that have done this for years or decades to kind of see, okay, where are we at, and take a step back and evaluate that, and see where are there rooms for improvement. I know when Melanie and I were working on this tool, I actually brought this tool to my team at Able SC because I oversee all of our employment staff, and we decided that we wanted to use this on a yearly basis to order to evaluate where we're at and then set some goals for where we're headed at in the future. And so I think that that would be a great use of it. On the slide here, I also have linked the actual resource. So the actual tool is linked here on slide 7, and you should have access to this PowerPoint in the conference, on the conference website. But if not, or if you can't locate that, Melanie and I are going to give our email addresses at the end of this presentation, and you can definitely feel free to reach out to us and we can make sure that you have a copy of this. Okay, I am moving on to the next slide, which is slide 8. And so there's 5 parts to the assessment, and we're going to dig into each part a little bit deeper, but just to kind of give you a very brief overview of the 5 parts. The first part is organizational investment in employment services. So you want to find out how invested your CIL is in providing employment services. And that's not only individual employment services, but also employment advocacy services, you know, all those different ways that we could provide employment services. The second part is support for employment services within social service programs. So how connected are we to the community, to our partners? The third is our approach to employment services. You know, what's our philosophy around employment? How do we as a CIL, as well as our staff, think about employment, and how is that coming across to consumers and to our partner agencies? The fourth one is organizational delivery of employment services. So as an organization, how do we actually deliver those services? What does that look like? What do those logistics look like? And then the fifth is organizational approach to benefit access and planning. So how have we made sure that benefits counseling is involved in this process, and that folks are being informed of all types of resources that would be available to them when we talk about employment. Okay, I am moving on to the next slide, which is slide 9. And I need to move my cat for a minute because he decided to sit here, right here on my notes, as he normally does. Anytime he hears me talking, he wants to come up here. He doesn't pay me any attention unless I'm talking or he hears someone else talk. So, okay, so I am going to talk about the first section of the assessment tool. And so I'm going to kind of give a brief overview of what those different parts are, and then we're gonna give you a visual. So investment.
Andy, sorry to interrupt, but somebody would like to see the cat.
I did not see that. Come here, Biscuit. Come here. Of course, he doesn't want to come now. He's like staring at me like, you told me not to. So Biscuit is a orange and white tabby. He is 13 years old. So I call him my old man. He's very docile, and he, like, for example, he doesn't really like me holding them right now, but he's not gonna do anything to hurt me. So good break, good cat break. So let's see. Your work colleague, yes. He definitely is. I'll say this, that when the pandemic first started and we started working from home, all my colleagues used to say that they've never had a meeting with me where Biscuit wasn't present in the meeting. So I said, we need to get him on the payroll then. But so moving right along, so the 5 different components. The first component is investment in employment services. And so what we're going to look at with that is board and leadership, the mission, vision and goals, financial model, and fundraising and development. So I am going to move on to slide 10, which is the visual example that we have of the tool of that first part, which again is the organizational investment in employment services. So this right here is a grid. It's a visual of part of that tool. And on the left-hand side, you'll see criteria number. We've got 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D. And at the top, going across to the right, each area, we evaluate that. You evaluate that for your CIL and say, okay, 1 means there's no current capacity in place. Right now, that's not really something that we're doing as a CIL. That's not something that we're thinking of. 3 is basic level of capacity in place. There's some thought put into it. You're kind of at the beginning levels of starting to think about this, but there's definitely some more that could be done. And then 5 is the high level of capacity. So you've really kind of mastered this particular area. You're an expert in that particular area. And so you can also do a score of a 2 or a 4, which is obviously that in between then. So 2, beginning level of capacity, and then 4 is the moderate level of capacity. So we give some examples. So the first criteria is the agency, board, and leadership. So if you would score this as a 1, that would mean that your agency, board, and leadership do not see employment as a priority or core service for the agency. If you would score this area as a 3, agency, board, and leadership are generally supportive of employment. Development of employment services come, though, from direct line supervisors or direct staff. And then a 5 would be agency, board, and leadership are highly supportive and see employment as a priority. Agency, board, and leadership provide guidance and planning to grow and strengthen leadership. So all throughout the agency, employment is important, and everyone in the agency recognizes the importance of employment services for people with disabilities. So in this example, we scored the agency at a 5. And then the second criteria on here are agency mission, vision, and goals. 1 would be the value of employment and vocational services are not part of the agency mission, value, or goals. A 3 would be the value of employment and vocational services are reflected indirectly in agency mission, value, and goals. So, there's some there in the mission, value, and goals, but it's not prominent. And then a 5 would be the value of employment and vocational services are clearly stated and reflected in the agency's mission, vision, and goals, including agency strategic planning. So there we scored a 4, moderate level of capacity. Again, we see the direct line there with the agency mission, value, and goals, but there could be a little bit of improvement there. The third criteria, financial model. So first, the no current capacity in place would mean employment services are not included in the agency financial model or budget. A 3 would mean employment services are included within the budget. There are generally not active efforts to expand or repurpose funds to support employment services. And then a 5 would mean agency has dedicated funding to support employment services and actively works to expand and diversify funding streams. And so for this example, we scored a 1, just to kind of give you an example of what this looks like. And then the fourth criteria in the organizational investment is fundraising and development. So a 1, that no current capacity would mean that employment services are not included in agency funding or development and are not the receipt of funds raised or developed. A 3 would mean employment services are part of fundraising and development and are occasionally receipts of money raised. Employment services may have lower priority within agency for funding efforts. And then a 5 would mean agency actively raises funds to support employment services. Development efforts include employment programs and outcomes to recruit funders and solicit donations. So in this example, we gave it a 1. And so on the right-hand corner, when we add up those different scores for this first part, the agency was scored at an 11. And kind of all this stuff will come together as we start going through the different parts. And then we'll also have an opportunity to share more and kind of talk about where our own agency is, as well as learn more about where you think your agency is. So I am going to now turn it over to Melanie.
Thanks, Sandy. So I think that was a really good example of how a CIL would evaluate in each section of this assessment tool, right? We had originally planned to go into 3 different breakout rooms to talk about part 2, part 3, and part 4 of the assessment. Unfortunately, we're not able to do that today. We do have 2 great interpreters and a cart recorder. Very much appreciate their service for this session. However, we can't do 3 breakout rooms because we can't make them all fully accessible. So instead, we're going to go through each one of these sections of the assessment tool, the way Sandy just overviewed part 1. And we're going to have group discussion. We want your input when we talk through each of the next parts of the assessment tool. So Abby, I don't know if you can make all the participants able to speak with their, turn their mics off and be able to speak. But the first breakout room would have been the second part of the assessment, which is organizational support for employment services within the social service programs. And those areas will cover consumer satisfaction, outcome measurement, employment as it's integrated across agency services and programs, and employment if it's integrated into your program procedures and operations at the agency. And Amy is going to lead us in that discussion. So please, in whatever way you can, raise your hand, put your comments in chat. We really want to be as engaging as possible. Thank you, Abby. Everyone now has the ability to unmute your mic. Okay, slide 12 will be the grid for part 2 of the assessment, and Amy, take it away.
Thanks, Melanie. We're on slide 12. We are going to talk about the second part, which is organizational support for employment services within social service programs. There is a similar grid on this slide to what Sandy described in one of the other previous slides. To the left, we have criteria number for 2A, 2B, 2C, and 2D. At the top, we have criteria going kind of from left to right. Number 1, which would be no current capacity in place. The third would be the basic level of capacity in place, and this is just an example. The fourth, of course, is the moderate level, and the fifth is the high level of capacity in place. So 2A goes into client satisfaction. Okay, and for this example, employment services and needs are not included in satisfaction surveys. And so for that sample, for 2A at client satisfaction, there was a score of a 1. Okay, this particular sample really shows the fact that services and client needs weren't really geared at individuals, at garnering perspective. And so that would be a rating of number 1. Now moving on to the next criteria, which is 2B at outcome measurement. The sample here focuses on the beginning level of capacity in place. So that was rated at a 2. So while they don't have, the agency didn't collect any basic employment data, services, and participation outcome, that would have been a 1. But this particular agency does have a basic employment collection system, including service participation and outcome for clients. And so they assess themselves, or in the sample, as a 2. All right. Moving right along onto the next criteria, which would be 2C, and that's focused on employment is integrated across agency services and agency programs. Now, these folks were rated at a basic level of capacity at a number 3, where there was some integration of employment and non-services that truly rely on supports and efforts of individual staff members. And so employment services weren't included in all agencies and programs. And so they weren't at a 5, but basically at the fact that there was some integration, there was a rate of number 3. Next on the list of criteria, we're at 2D. Employment is integrated into program procedures and operations. And these folks ended up scoring a 1 in this criteria. Basically, there is no mention of or reference of any employment in procedures, protocols, policies, forms, descriptions. And so I think that part 2 really gives folks who are completing this portion of the assessment the opportunity to be challenged, to really think through kind of where their agency is at with respect to providing any type of employment support within some of the established social service programs within the state or whatever locale that we're operating in. And so these folks ended up getting a total score for part 2 of a 7. And I think one of the SMEs mentioned this will all make sense as we continue building upon our content. And so before I move to the next slide, I want to welcome the SMEs, Melanie and Sandy, just to make sure that I covered everything. If there's anything you'd like to add, please do so. If not, tell me to move to the next slide.
Thanks, Amy. I think maybe we can take a couple of minutes now and just have any of the participants who care to share. This would what we would have been doing in the breakout rooms, but to share your own agency's experience in terms of your capacity to start developing or expanding your employment services in these criteria. So is there anybody who would like to share what your CIL is doing around client satisfaction and where you think your CIL might score on this assessment?
It's a safe place, folks. We're excited to have a rich dialogue. So don't be afraid, don't be shy.
This is Kim Gibson, and I just want to point out that every participant has the ability to unmute their mic and join in without even raising your hand.
Thanks, Kim. Anyone confused about where to start? It can be overwhelming. Anything, any thoughts around this?
This is Pat, and I'm from North Carolina, and I do not work for a center. But I'm just a little, we've been running across, and I'm a community volunteer, a lot of different issues, particularly in the peer support world and mental health world and the substance use world. We are trying to, in some of our groups, do more with TBI. And one of the problems I've heard with getting that off the ground has been ACL not willing to work with the woman that tried to really help get something started here for TBI. But, you know, there are certain groups and even certain advocacy organizations that you have put out here, but there are other groups that are glaringly left out. And some of us in those groups feel that some of the things that should be happening are not happening already. And it kind of seems like they're being reinforced by ACL. For instance, in the past 10 years, we have had a 91% increase in North Carolina in involuntary commitments. This is a population, though, that I don't see mentioned here. But the group that should be helping and we should be fighting this along with helping other folks with these disabilities is fairly new to the state. Before we went private nonprofit with our P&A, it was under the government, the state of North Carolina. It was GACPD. And quite frankly, some of us feel like maybe things were spread out a little better when it was that way. But yet, just like the direct support staff, there's a big movement, particularly for the direct support staff, for the IDD consumers, for none of their workers to be making less than $15 an hour in this state. We have a big peer support workforce and a lot of trained peer support specialists that have went through a lot more training than maybe some of the direct support professionals have. But they're always carved out as a special group. But at the same time, this other group that's very well trained as well is being left out. There's problems here that I see. I mean, I think I see and we've got all this diversity, equity, and inclusion supposed to be happening across the state and the country, but it don't look like it when you look at some of this. And it don't look like it's happening from the federal level in some of this particular stuff. And I'm sorry, that's just how I see it.
So
All right.
this is Melanie. No, Amy, I was going to pitch to you anyway. Patricia, thank you for your comments. I think, you know, the questions that you raise are good and important and valid ones. I'm going to let Amy answer from her perspective as being part of the DETAC, because this presentation is very specific to Centers for Independent Living and their capacity to build employment-related services. So if it feels narrow to you, it is. This particular presentation is targeted for Centers for Independent Living. But Amy,
and we got great centers for independent living across the state. And I've just come off of our Independent Living Council. I've just recently rotated off.
Oh, good.
But you know, and I don't have any problem with any of our independent living centers. But
well, thank you for that.
Well, I'm really proud of our independent living centers across the state and think we need more.
Yeah,
but
you do.
You know, I just think we all got some, and I know this is more targeted for them, but we got work to do.
Yes. So Amy, any comments or follow up you'd want to give to Patricia,
bet.
and then we'll move on. Okay.
Sounds great. Well, Patricia, just kind of piggybacking on what Melanie said, we'd like to thank you for being transparent, because that's what we're all about here at the DETAC. First and foremost, I want to clarify that I never said we solely serve people with IDD. We focus on people with a broad range of abilities, no matter what age they are or where they're from. So I just want to clarify that we are a technical assistance center that serves any person with a disability, not just IDD. Now that may get a little confusing, and I can see, I think perhaps maybe where the confusion is that so many of the grantees that we serve are primarily focused on IDD, right? Like state councils and maybe primarily some of the USED. So I can see where the confusion might come from. Also, because this specific presentation is solely geared for CILs. But I do want to clarify that we do have an array of other technical assistance products, resources, webinars that are geared for other grantees. I think you mentioned protection and advocacy a moment ago, Patricia. We actually have quite a bit of publications that were drafted specifically for protection and advocacy agencies by Ruby Moore from the GAO, Steve Schwartz from the Center for Public Representation. So we do publish an array of resources and issue trainings geared at the array of differing structures and needs for grantees. What I can say about the DEI focus, I, before this, was at the federal government at the Office of Disability Employment Policy with the U.S. Department of Labor. Before that, I was with the state IDB agency in Tennessee as the employment director. In my career at the state and federal government, I have never seen such a focus on DEI. Now that looks different with every administration, but what our funders are telling us is they want more of that we are to make sure that we're showing people of color, with disabilities, people of abilities in our resources, that we're including staff who are people of color, who are able to rise up as leaders in the field to share best practices and strategies. So we welcome additional comments, but I just wanted to clarify some of the areas of focus for us and make sure that when people know about the DETAC, we're not just IDD focused, and we do focus on those grantees that I mentioned at the initial part of the conversation. Would love to talk more offline, Patricia, if you'd like. But now what I'll do is turn it back over to Melanie so that you can kind of.
And I want to thank you for that. And
Yeah.
there's one more area I want you to think about focusing on, because their lives have been turned upside down since the pandemic, and that's the seniors. They need more training and more access to programs. Many of them need to go back to work because they can't afford to buy groceries now. And, a lot of times they're turned away. There's ageism is huge in our country. So, inclusion includes everybody.
I agree. Thank you. Go for it,
Thank
Melanie.
you. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Patricia. Okay, so back to the assessment. This part 2 covers, as Amy shared with you, client satisfaction, outcome measurement capacity at your center, and whether and how deeply employment is integrated. I'm going to move on to the next slide, which is slide 13. And this part of the assessment, which is the third area of the assessment tool, covers employment service model, a center's ability to collaborate with federal, state, local employment system, partnerships with employment programs and services, and the labor market and workforce needs. So Sandy, if we can go to slide 14. This is the grid. We're going to go through some examples of the sample CIL that we have in this grid and how this particular center scored itself. Again, on the left-hand side are the criteria numbers, 3A, 3B, 3C, 3D, and the criteria are the 4 topics that I just mentioned from the previous slide. It's the same model where we were assessing the center from no current capacity to a high level of capacity. In the area of employment service models, this particular center said that their agency is aware of the basic service models such as supported employment, transitional jobs, career pathways, and that they address employment services with a combination of referral options and direct services. So they scored themselves on a scale of 1 to 5 as a number 3. Under the category of collaboration with local, state, and federal employment systems like the state BR, Ticket to Work program, TANF programs, workforce investment programs, American Job Centers, veterans programs. So there's a lot of state and county agencies that centers can collaborate when they're thinking about developing employment-related programs. This particular center said that they have a general awareness of those employment systems. They can match most of their clients to the appropriate services that are offered by those various systems, and that relationships, referral agreements, and partnerships related to employment programs and/or services exist, but they're limited. So this CIL has some experience and knowledge about employment services. They have some interaction with state agencies. Maybe they know some people at those agencies, and they have a good relationship where they can talk back and forth and share resources and information. Sometimes they share referrals. And so they can do some limited employment related services with these entities, but they don't know what they don't know, and they're not fully engaged with all of those systems, and they don't have strong contractual partnership relationships in place yet. So they scored themselves a 3 on this one. The third criteria is the partnership with employment programs and or services. So the agency is aware of local employment programs and or other services in their communities. They do have some referral agreements related to employment, and some of those could be formal or informal, and some of those agreements are in place. So this is a little bit different than the one before, because the one before is specific to state agencies or maybe county agencies, but often are federally sourced dollars. In this partnership with employment programs, it could be other nonprofit organizations, maybe a recovery resources, maybe a drug and alcohol system, maybe a mental health program, maybe a DD program. So they're a little bit different. And this particular CIL scored themselves a 2 in this area. So they were aware of state referral and funding sources, but not as much aware of what other community-based organizations are providing employment-related services. And then the last criteria in their approach to employment services is their relationship or understanding of the labor market, local labor market, and the workforce needs. So this particular CIL has some basic awareness of the local labor market. They have some awareness of employment opportunities for people with disabilities in their community, and they've made some effort to connect consumers with those services, and they can match the local workforce need, but they don't really have, complete, full, up-to-date awareness, especially like since the pandemic, our workforce needs have changed dramatically in the last few years. So getting a good grasp of what that labor market is, what the needs are, what employers' needs are, what kind of training an individual would need to work in that particular industry, whether it's going to a facility every day or whether it's working virtually. So they gave themselves a 4. They're kind of in between 3 and 5. They've got a really pretty good understanding, but need to stay current and learn a little bit more. So this particular CIL, under the organizational approach to employment services, had a total score of 12. I think we're going to go ahead, instead of doing breakout discussion, we're going to go ahead to the other 2 sections and then see where we are in time and maybe open it up for a little bit more dialogue when we're done with reviewing the assessment. So let's go on to slide 15. This would have been also another breakout room. This component is looking at the CIL's current model and capacity for delivering employment services. It covers a whole variety of areas, everything from vocational and career planning to assessing GED and high school diploma that individuals with disabilities coming to the center have or need services to get their GEDs. It includes occupational skills training or post-secondary education, skills training around employment preparation or job readiness skills, what the CIL's ability to provide those services are. Can the CIL provide job search and job placement services? And then what is their level of relationship with employers? Do they have those employer partnerships? Are they doing job development and marketing to the business community? And what kind of job retention and support services are they able to provide to employers in their community? So I will pass it on to Sandy on slide 16. Sandy, are you taking this one?
Yes,
Yes, okay, there we go. Thank
I
you.
will.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Melanie. So we see a very similar grid that we've had in the other sections. And so this is section or part 4, and I am on slide 16. And this is talking about the organizational delivery of employment services. So we've got, see, 6 different categories on here that Melanie just reviewed, and then at the top the same layout where we are rating them from 1 to 5. And so in this particular example for vocational and career planning, this CIL rated themselves as a 2, and so that is in between that no current capacity to a basic level of capacity. And so that no current capacity says no vocational or career planning services offered, referral options have not been developed. And the 3 says staff have some training on vocational and career pathway planning. Staff have option to refer to partner agency for service. Staff have some skill in working with consumers on their career development and assist to create career plans that reflect consumers' needs, interests, and capabilities. And so I would think from this that this is very likely a CIL whose staff are very new to provided employment services, and they still really need to build up their skills as far as providing those services to consumers. So the next criteria is access to GED, occupational training, and post-secondary education. And the CIL in this example gave themselves a 3 on this. And that is a basic level, which means agency maintains a few referral relationships with local training and education programs. Individual staff help consumers make employment-related connections and referrals. And so, you know, typically here you would see a CIL that, you know, has a couple of different relationships with some post-secondary training programs, GED programs, and you know, they usually just refer consumers out to those types of programs, but really don't have that kind of broad resource development for those different types of programs, and they're not necessarily actively building new partnerships. The 3rd criteria is employment preparation and or job readiness services. And the CIL gave themselves a 2 for this criteria. And so that is in between the no employment preparation or job readiness services offered. And in between the job readiness services are provided directly or via referral as a part of general direct services. Life and soft skills trainings are offered. Staff work with consumers to resolve obstacles to prepare for employment. Consumer services plan may include goals and strategies to improve job readiness services. And so again, we see, you know, there's definitely room for improvement. That's what the CIL is saying here, is that, you know, there may be very limited job readiness services, either the CIL provides or they're referring consumers out for those services. But there's definitely some room for improvement there, and either that referral, those referral relationships can be built more, or the CIL can directly provide more of those services and become more experienced and gain more expertise in that area. The 4th criteria is job search or placement services, and the CIL gave themselves a 1 on here. And that means no job search or placement services offered. There are no referral agencies in place to assist with job search or placement services. And so that means, you know, basically it doesn't exist. So either the CIL doesn't provide that service directly, and also there's no referral agencies. The CIL doesn't necessarily refer consumers out to agencies that can specifically assist consumers with their job search or placement services. And so I want to note on this part that even though a CIL may score themselves a 1 in this area, that doesn't mean that, well, let me say this differently. Just because you have a high score in this particular area, the job search or placement services, it doesn't mean that that you don't provide this service. So for example, Able South Carolina, the agency that I work with, we don't provide direct job placement services. We do help consumers with their job search, but we don't directly place consumers into employment. But we do have a wealth of different resources and agencies that we can refer consumers to help make sure that, you know, if they need that job placement services, that they have that. So, you know, in this example, I would probably rate our agency as a 4, just because we have those resources and things built. But this is not necessarily saying that a CIL has to provide the job placement services, or, you know, really some of these other services either, but that if the CIL doesn't necessarily provide that they have a rich referral system in order to connect the consumer to those services. So the 5th criteria is employer partnerships, job development, and marketing to the business community. And the CIL gave themselves a 1 in this example. And that means agency does not have partnerships with employers. The agency has not identified staff or allotted time to partner with employers. And then the 6th criteria is job retention and support. And the CIL gave itself a 1 in this area. And that means no job retention services offered, no referral agreements are available for these services. And so in this example, the CIL gave themselves a total of 10 for part 4. Okay, so moving right along, I am on slide 17 now, and this is the 5th section.
Danny, sorry, it's Amy. Just gonna, I think I saw someone's hand raised, but then it disappeared. And so I don't know if the person, Barbara, did you want to ask a question or say something?
Yeah, but I didn't want to interrupt her train of thought, and so I lowered my hand. But
Go for it.
well,
Yeah, I'm
so-
sorry, Barbara. I didn't see it. I didn't see
Oh,
the
that's
hand
okay,
raised.
honey. It's all right. Do I need to say who I am and where I'm from, or does it matter? Can I just go straight to my question? I guess
I
it makes
think
no
you
never
can-
mind.
I think you can go straight to your question.
All right. So I was real interested when y'all saying that y'all don't y'all refer out to people who are looking for work. And I was wondering if you do follow up on that and how successful you know they are. And is this something that y'all have looked at and said, these people aren't always landing work, and so maybe we should do something, or we should just keep referring out and let it be somebody else's problem?
So, yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question, Barbara. I apologize if I didn't communicate that correctly, but I didn't mean to say that we referred people out that are looking for employment. We definitely assist individuals with disabilities with their employment goals. We do not provide direct job placement.
Okay.
So we do not directly place individuals with disabilities into employment.
Okay. Well, then I must have misheard. I apologize.
Yeah, no problem. I may have misspoke that. So
No, that's probably me, honey.
who
It's okay.
knows? Yeah,
Thank
but thank you. Thank you for your question. Okay. And thank y'all. And thank you, Amy, for catching that hand raised, because I did not see that. So I am on slide 17 now, and we are talking about the 5th component of the tool, and that is the organizational approach to benefit access and planning. And there's 3 criteria. And so the first criteria is partnerships with state and federal agencies offering benefit and entitlements. And number 2, knowledge of work incentives and the impact of paid employment on benefits and or entitlements. And number 3 is benefit planning and or access building. So I am going to move on to slides 18. And same layout that we've been going through with just the 3 different criteria that I mentioned in the previous slide. So for This example for the first criteria, partnership with state and federal agencies offering benefits and entitlements. The CIL gave themselves a 3, which means a relationship is in place with agencies that offer benefits and entitlement programs, but communication is sporadic and relies heavily on individual relationships. So, you know, again, definitely work to be done with that. There's some relationships, but you know, it's kind of all over the place, kind of sporadic. The second criteria is knowledge of work incentives and the impact of paid employment on benefits and or entitlements. And the CIL gave themselves a 1 in this criteria. And that means program staff are minimally aware of work incentives and the impact of paid employment on benefits and entitlements. Agency does not provide staff training on the topic and does not have relationships with partners who provide benefits counseling. And then the third criteria is benefit planning and or asset building. And the CIL gave themselves a 3 in this criteria. Which means program staff has general knowledge of benefits planning and or access building. Staff rely primarily on experts in the field and can make referrals to increase consumer self-sufficiency and increased financial stability. And so in this example, the CIL gave themselves, it's a total of 7 from the scores. And so, yeah, that was that part. And then I am going to move right along to slide 19, which is where we're going to do the breakout rooms, which we said we couldn't, we're not able to do that because of the lack of accessibility with the interpreters and such. But that basically concludes the 5 different sections of the tool. And I am going to pass it on to Melanie, who is going to wrap us up with the tool.
Great, thanks, Sandy. So that was a lot. Remember that this is a tool and it is your tool and your center can use it to whatever degree you feel is important or necessary based on where you are in your journey of developing employment-related services for people with disabilities, right? So, you know, Sandy gave a good example of how her center doesn't do one of the particular criteria that's listed. Well, then, you know, the center doesn't get penalized in scoring, right? It's your tool, you score for yourselves. So, you know, what she could do is either give herself a 4, as she suggested, or say that really doesn't apply to me. And so I'm not even going to count that particular criteria in my overall score, right? So this sample center, in identifying existing capacity, it has the 5 sections on the grid on the left and lists the names of each of those 5 sections. And then lists, I see you, Barbara, and then lists the total score of each of those 5 sections on the right. Okay, Barbara.
Hey, I was wondering, I saw e-learning mentioned a couple of times. How much of a role does e-learning play in y'all's developing employment services? Do you use it as very often, or is that just?
It's a great question. We do not use it in terms of course development. We use, so e-learning, if that's how you're talking about, you know, how you're defining e-learning as a
It's instructional design, creating.
Yes, correct.
Like, do you do like build an online course to, for example, to help people get ready for employment? Like, you know, something that goes, here's a checklist that you can go through and,
Right.
you know, and have people go watch that and help them develop their own checklist for getting ready for applying for employment. I mean, that's what I was wondering, if you build
Right.
any tools like that.
Yeah, good question. We currently do not at our center, Sandy.
So I want to make sure I understand this correctly. So it would be tools specifically to provide to the consumer.
Yeah, but then I
Okay.
don't know, you could develop build something
Mhm,
to help you work with other organizations.
mhm.
But
Yeah.
I just wondered if you were using that and how you were using it, and if you were using in the capability the example I gave.
Yeah, so we don't use that at Able, South Carolina. We do have tons of different resources that we share. We actually have the employment team has a employment resources folder. And so within that folder, we have resources categorized by different items. So for example, there's one folder that is interview prep resources. There's one folder that's resume resources. There's one folder that is how to talk with consumers about gaps in their resume history. And so we we share those different resources between our agency and with our staff, but there's not necessarily a particular checklist we use, just because we find that our consumers are in all different places, right? And we really want to kind of meet them where they're at and then provide the services that they want, because they're the ones directing their services. And so with that, we found that a checklist has not really been beneficial in the past, because we don't necessarily want to use kind of like a cookie cutter approach to everyone.
No.
The services are really individualized.
I was wondering if any of your resources were interactive, and I just gave the checklist as an example, but do you use any interactive resources, and through that, e-learning being a way to create that sort of thing?
Maybe
So
this might be for you. Sorry, Sandy.
yeah, but I'm just, so are you talking about interactive resources with consumers?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. We, there's lots of interactive stuff that we use with ONET, with, even looking at job accommodation network, we'll have a consumer and a staff member get on that website and kind of, navigate it together. There's some like job shadowing, like videos online that, are really easy to pull up, that sometimes consumers will do, and then just kind of like write out like different things that, they liked about the job, they didn't like about the job, and then, be able to share that with our staff.
Okay. That's interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thanks, Barbara, for your question. So we have a couple more minutes left. I want to wrap up the assessment tool that we've been discussing for your center's capacity in building or expanding your employment-related services. And I think it's important to reiterate that this is your tool. You want to complete it as thoroughly as possible, but given the context of your own organization's strategic direction, right? So if there's things that don't apply or aren't immediate priorities, you can always put them on the back burner. Because looking at this whole tool, if you look at this particular screen where the sample center has scored itself, it gave itself a total score of 56 out of a potential 105, right? If it got fives in every single criteria, it would have a score of 105. And at that point, I don't know that it would need to be taking this assessment anyway. It could be doing all kinds of different things. But the idea here is not to, say, oh, well, we did 80 out of 105, or we did, 90 out of 105. It's really to look at where your capacity building needs are based on your mission and based on your organizational's short-term strategy for building out employment-related programs. So once those are scored in each of those 5 areas, then you would go back And Cindy, can you back up just to a couple of grids? So you would go back, yeah, this is a great one. You would go back up to, this is part 4, organizational delivery of employment services. And maybe your priority is where you scored yourself a 1. So you want to look at, well, there we go, job search and placement services. So maybe the center says, like Able, North Carolina, no, we've made a direct decision not to do that service. We do all kinds of programming around getting somebody ready for work, and we do a lot of employment related training and program, but we don't do specifically job placement, and we're okay with that. In that case, they either wouldn't score themselves at all and just take those points out of the bottom score, or they would say, this is how I'm interpreting that based on our agency's priorities, and therefore we're going to change those words in 4 or 5 and give ourselves a better score, right? And so it's a way to really look at your organizational's immediate decisions around how you're going to move forward in this area and create goals. So maybe 4D is not a priority, but 4E is. The agency does not have partnerships with employers and hasn't identified staff or allocated time to partner with an employer. Well, that's pretty important if you if you're working with individuals who are looking to go out into the community. You want to help them build that social network, and you want to help them build connections to the employment opportunities that are in your community. So that might be your priority for this particular part 4. And so you could go through each one of these parts of the assessment and pick your number 1 priority to work on, and that creates your new set of strategies. So Sandy, if you could go to slide 21. So what that would look like then is the existing capacity that a center has. First of all, you want to pat yourselves on the back and where you do have the skills, because again, we're focused on numbers, and 56 out of 105 might not feel good, but know that it is, because A, you're showing up and you're doing this, and B, you're identifying your top priorities where you can improve and grow your organization and serve more people and help them get into the workforce. So where this sample center excelled at was their agency, board, and leadership. The board and leadership is committed to employment, and that's critical. That has to happen before you can do anything else, right? Their agency mission, vision, and goals also scored very high. So they know that not only do they want to do it, they've actually articulated that in their vision for their organization and have created goals around creating an employment program. They're pretty well established in their community, and they know their local labor market and the workforce needs. Always learn more, always do a little better, but those are things where they have the highest level of capacity right now. And they're aware of basic employment service models, so they know where they can go in the community, both to state agencies for state and federal funding, but also to regular community, other nonprofit organizations, so they can collaborate and work with those entities to learn from them, to work with them, to help provide services to a broad range of people with disabilities. And finally, and very importantly, they have knowledge about benefits planning, because they know the impact of work on benefits, and they need to make sure that the persons that they're serving are fully informed when they're making the choice to go back to work, and understanding how that paycheck will impact their benefits and how they can prevent kind of falling off the benefits cliff that happens so frequently for people with disabilities. Then where they need to grow, where some of the places in which they scored the lowest, was that they need to include employment services in their agency financial model and budget and fund development plans. So they have the commitment to do it, but they don't have the financial resources yet, or they haven't allocated resources for their employment program. They determined that they need to integrate employment into their program procedures and operations. They need to build capacity and offer job search and placement services for this particular CIL. They do want to grow in that area. They need to build relationships and partnerships related to employment programs and services with state systems. So they know they're out there, and one of their strategies is to grow those relationships. And they need to provide training opportunities for staff to further build their skills in benefits counseling. And then finally, and also most importantly, because we need the employers to hire people, they need to expand their partnerships with employers. So this is how it all comes together. You score your center, you identify your strengths, and you pick your top half dozen areas in which you know you want to grow your center, and that becomes part of your annual plan or your strategic plan moving forward. And you have some intentionality and a roadmap of how to build your employment program or expand your employment program within your center. So that's it for the tool. I think the next slide, Amy, if you'd like to go over some of that.
Yes, thank you very much, Melanie and Sandy, for this phenomenal presentation. This next slide, number 22, highlights some supplemental information that you can use as you kind of rethink through your partnerships and the direction that you seek to take in the upcoming new year. What I want to remind folks here is that, say you've just learned some of this information about the assessment, or even maybe partnership development during yesterday's presentation that our CIL leaders here, SMEs, presented about, but you might need more one-to-one TA, maybe a few individualized calls, or more targeted assistance with getting some support to complete this assessment. Well, I would like to just formally announce that the DETAC could provide some free technical assistance to any Center for Independent Living who may need some additional support to maybe dissect and really complete this assessment holistically. If that is you, if maybe you're thinking my board or myself or my team and I would really appreciate some meetings with both or one of the SMEs, I encourage you to please reach out to us at the DETAC. I will give you in just a moment emails because we can set you up with an initial call with the SMEs and then to identify a technical assistance plan specifically geared at your Center for Independent Living, those specific partnerships that you have within your neck of the woods. So I just wanted to encourage you folks to reach out. We acknowledge this is such a robust tool and there's a lot of information, and we'd like to just offer that free guidance if you're one of those CILs that really needs it or just maybe need a call for a couple of minutes. I'd like to encourage you to look into those wonderful resources on the links. And what I also did, thank you, Ken, for the warning. What I also did just a moment ago is I placed a link to our learning management system in the chat. Basically, we have a learning management system that has a total of 5 courses, okay? Melanie and Sandy actually tag teamed and developed a course for us. We also have one on financial well-being. We have one focused on DD councils. We have one focused on partnering with employers. And so we definitely recommend that you take a look and take a deeper dive into these resources and how you could utilize these resources, within your own service delivery system in your organization. What's on our next slide? 23. Perfect. I don't know what Melanie, Sandy, did you want to just kind of wrap it up? And let me put my contact information in the chat real quick.
Go ahead, Sandy.
Yeah, definitely. So Melanie, I just wanted to say, thank you so much for attending our webinar today, and wanted to give our contact information on the slide. So on the slide is my name and title and agency again, as well as my email address, sjordan@able-sc.org. And I'll let Melanie give her information.
I will reiterate Sandy's thanks for your being here and your participation. I think if there's one takeaway, it's take the tool. Take the tool, look at it, don't let it intimidate you. It is yours to use and you can start wherever you want. It just, even if you're starting on that very last page and saying, okay, what would be our strengths and what would be our 1, 2, 3 areas where we need to focus. It's a motivator and it helps give you a jump start into growing into this area. So thank you for being here. My name is on the screen, the slide, and my email address is mhogan@leapinfo.org. And Amy, I don't know, you put your information in the chat, but if you want to say it out loud, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you, everyone, again to April for having us here, to our SMEs, the dedication that our SMEs have to the center and to the CILs across the country. The DETAC email is aodemploymentta@gmail.com. I also placed in my email address in the chat, which is consultamg.llc@gmail.com. And so we encourage you to reach out. We're happy to help in any way we can. And we really look forward to staying connected with CILs, to working with CILs in this next program year. So thank you again for having us. And thanks again to our SMEs. Kim, turning it back over to you.
Okay, I did see a hand up. So Barbara, go ahead and reach out to the team with further questions, since it was right at the last second I seen, sorry. Thank you guys for a wonderful presentation. These are a great group of people. I know pretty much everyone that's on the panels and they're awesome. So please take time to complete your evaluation when the webinar closes, as that lets us know how we can continue to improve and keep providing training that you find most useful. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to having you join us for the next session. I'm not sure when that starts. Abby might know.
Our next session will start in 30 minutes. So that'll be 3:30 Eastern, 2:30 Central, 1:30 Mountain, 12:30 Pacific.
Okay. So thank you, everybody. Again, my name's Kim Gibson. I keep forgetting to say that to begin with, but thank you for joining us and have a great rest of the conference.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.